the band Coheed and Cambria will be at the Leah Core Center on July 27th. Tickets are going to go on sale tomorrow at 10 a.m. at coheedandcambria.com. They are promoting their highly anticipated new record, which is Vaxis to a Window of the Waking Mind, and spiraling somewhere in the United States as we speak on a bus, headed out on tour. He is joining us live. Please welcome the singer of the band, the man behind the music, Mr. Claudio Sanchez. Hey! This morning. Claudio, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure, man. Listen, I'm going to be straight up with you from the very get-go because we're excited about having this interview, and I just have the smallest amount of knowledge of Coheed and Cambria. I've been aware of you guys for a long time. I only know a few songs, and I was like, man, do I kind of, BS this guy and just pretend like I know all of his music and do the interview that way? But then I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? You've got such diehard fans. The fans know about your music. They're going to go to your show. But how about the people that might not be that familiar with? And let's bring some new people on board this. And so I want to be one of those people. And the reason I know I'm going to be one of those people is I had this same type of sensation of just checking out and diving into your catalog in the last couple of days that I had when I first, somebody turned me on to Rush. Okay, so I'm a prog guy, and Rush is my band. And when somebody played 2112 for me the first time, that was my first dive into conceptual music. And I was like Pinto in Animal House when he finds out that there's an atom on your fingernail could be a tiny little universe. I was just like, I can't handle this. I was blown away. So I'm really open to diving deep into the world of Coheed and Cambria because it's a very dense universe. There's a lot of material there. And I bet you love hearing about people coming on board and really experiencing the music,
Yeah, well, that's actually a big conversation we had when making Vaxis 2 with our A&R Johnny Minardi. It's just like, Coheed and Cambria has been a band now like 20 years. And it's like, well, what does that look like to somebody coming on board? And it's not that different from, say, like somebody getting introduced to maybe the Star Wars universe and then realizing there's this whole mythology, this whole catalog of records behind them that's vast, and so yeah, I mean it's definitely a conversation that I love sort of having is like, this is way more than just music. It's a culture, and all because I started it as a kid because I was shy. I just had a hard time singing about myself, and I was afraid to let people know about me. So I created a concept to hide behind.
And for those who don't know, Claudio, is that the band's work, now listen, there are concept albums. There's The Wall, and there's 2112, and there's Dark Side of the Moon, and these albums that have this entire, project that's just filled with this story, and it's amazing. But the band's entire work, from what I understand, is all a conceptual piece. Is that a correct assumption or a correct characterization?
Yeah. Yep, with the exception of one record, which was called The Color Before the Sun, but everything else is part of a mythology I constructed, a science fiction epic called The Amory Wars, where Coheed and Cambria... Yeah, where Coheed and Cambria are essentially, in the first 5 stories, act as kind of the Adam and Eves. They sort of set the whole mythology off. And then everything else is really about their sons coming into manhood, like an adolescent growing into a man and understanding like his place within this universe that he essentially has control over. And then after that, we kind of fall into this new story arc that we're working on called Vaxis. And that, when I look at the Vaxis story arc and I think about myself in there, whereas like those original Coheed records, I see myself as the adolescent and I'm growing up. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the Vaxis story arc, I see myself as the father, and that's really kind of the trajectory there. Those are the themes there, is how a father deals with, a man kind of coming into his own as a dad, basically.
I love this notion. I would have been, and I am now going to, because I just as Preston said, we're both fans of this kind of approach to music. few and far between these days. And it used to be the norm. And you would just get there and you would immerse and you would look at album art and you would be, what's the message? And you talk about album art. You've got the comic series. I mean, you've got all of this stuff that's dovetailing. Preston, at 16 or 17, if you found this band, you'd be outside the tour bus.
Oh, yeah.
Bugging the crowd. I mean, because honestly, I heard so many people that I respected and respect, Claudio, the band's name would always come up. And I'm like, well, I love this stuff. And so circuitously, I would experience and go, yeah, that's good. Not understanding, I mean, what is a very rare situation where it's not just simply a thematic concept album, it's a concept band. Mm-hmm. That is awesome. That's a mind blower. Did you start to fall into it just through the growth of the band, or was that the modus operandi from day one?
So when I started writing material, I think I was about, I was a teenager. Right. And I became the singer of this band. And when I was writing the material for it, before it was Coheed and Cambria, I started to realize, like, I just had a hard time. I had a hard time singing songs about myself, putting my heart on my sleeve. But though they were, so I just didn't want anybody to go, oh, I know that person now because of the music, So I started to construct this concept. So I took a trip to Paris, France in 1998. And there's when I started to construct the ideas of Coheed and Cambria, the characters, some of the first songs on the first record. Just because I hadn't been anywhere. I'm a New York kid. The furthest I had been was New Jersey. And now I'm in Paris, and it was so wonderful. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I should just really adopt this as a songwriter. Of course, I'm a teenager. I'm not thinking that strategically, but right. That's just what I thought. I was like, you know what? I'm shy. Let's just put this out there with a curtain, and that's what I did. And then, when the band got signed in 2001 to Equal Vision, an indie up in New York, they didn't like the name of the band we had at the time. And so Coheed and Cambria happened to be this project I was working on the side, and the band really liked it. And so with that, we adopted the name, and I took the concept with me, and it's just kind of been I guess from day one when the signing, I guess you could say it's always been the thing.
That's great.
All right, so you had mentioned entering this universe for the first time, and you had sort of drawn the parallel between your music and, let's say, the Star Wars universe. So for us, right. The Star Wars universe started with Episode 4. So if we were talking to somebody who had never seen a movie before, we might start with Episode 4, and other people might say, no, you got to start with Episode 1, and then other people might say, no, you need to start with Rogue One or whatever. So what I want to ask you, 20 years later, and I've done this with other bands where I discovered a band, 4 records in. I'm like, okay, well, where do I start? Do I start with the newest stuff or do I go back to the beginning? So for you, for anybody who just heard Shoulders for the first time, and that is their introduction to the band, do you recommend starting there, or do you recommend going back to 2002 to the Second Stage Turbine Blade?
I think it's totally subjective. I mean, this answer changes all the time. It all depends on timing, right? Like if we were to finish, say, the Vaxxis story, which is 3 more records, my answer to this question would be different. I would say, I'm really proud of Vaxxis 2. I think Vaxxis 2 really kind of stands off on its own. I also really love the idea of coming into something late and then discovering the fact that there's all this other stuff to consume. But if I had to say, Second Stage Turbine Blade is basically the second part of the Amory Wars. That is the second part in this huge mythology that's probably going to ultimately be 12 parts. But that's the second part. The origin story of those characters is in a record called Year of the Black Rainbow. So technically that's the first. Here's the thing. So sorry, here's where my crazy gets into play.
All right, it's all good.
Every record has a numeric value. So Year of the Black Rainbow, year being singular, Second Stage Turbine Blade, second being 2, In Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3 is the third part, Good Apollo 4.
Oh my.
So every record has its numeric value within the story. The Vaxxis story arc, however, that's sort of more cryptic. The V for Vaxxis stands for the Roman numeral 5, and the axis in which all of the Amory Wars is now going to revolve. So it's a little heady.
No. This is absolutely, and I love it because I'm looking at a color code that explains a song can be exclusive, like Red, for example. A song can sometimes be exclusively from the point view of a character in the real. I mean, there's a breakdown of tone of who is speaking based on a color code. Your fan base is obviously very much into the minutia. We are as well for so many things that are pop culture, and obviously you're a science fiction fan. So what has rocked your? I got to assume you're a Dune fan, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I love all versions of Dune. I love the Frank Herbert book. I actually liked the David Lynch movie. I mean, when I saw that, I was a child.
So did Steve and I.
Yeah,
I had no.
We're fans as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I really love the new one. So yes, I'm definitely a fan of Dune. Definitely a fan of Star Wars. I also really like I liked Krull. Are you guys familiar?
Krull, of course, Krull.
Yeah.
It's cheesy goodness.
Oh my God!
That sort of star, that weapon,
star that he would throw.
was awesome. Yeah.
The glaive.
The glaive.
Yeah,
Dude, I wanted one of those so bad. Yeah, I totally. Yeah.
I was like, right, but like so that was like the thing, right? So when I was a kid, like you'd sit watching HBO in hopes that Star Wars would come on, and HBO would give you like give you Krull, they give you Ice Pirates. Do you guys remember Ice Pirates?
with Robert Urich. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Like so, those are like sort of the those are like the science fiction movies that I got kind of brought up on. Comic books, obviously. Anything sort of pop culture, like Saturday morning cartoons, He-Man, G.I. Joe. I was like I thought Tron. I think the era that I grew up in. I mean, I'm a pre-adolescence. I'm in the '80s, so it's very character driven. People are trying to sell toys essentially, and like so characters are very defined. Even in like the most cheesy way, when you think of like G.I. Joe, you got Shipwreck, who's like the sailor, or so like. I think I was kind of lucky in that respect because I don't know that all that stuff really influenced me.
Oh, we talk
like
about
hard.
this. Yeah, we talk about this, especially from that period. We were just talking about the movie Alien Nation. Do you remember that with the?
Yep, absolutely.
Right. All of those were they were very high concept, very easily consumable science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny because that gives us a fixed point at what was your impetus for this, and it all makes sense. But that's very cool. So besides the comic book and the music, since everything obviously has a very theatrical aspect to it, would you take a foray into films? Is this something that has actually happened and we're unaware of, that you've announced any plans for films? Because I think your vision would be perfect for this.
We've attempted it, but on a very grassroots sort of small level, not in a very serious way. Like, no one's really come to approach us essentially. Okay. Like at one point, Mark Wahlberg tried to get involved, his company Leverage, but it wasn't really, I mean, I think it was like the wrong time because now I got to tell you, like, I get asked this question way more than I've ever. And I think it has a lot to do with maybe the Vaxxas story arc because a lot of the accompanying art, the story is very photographic. It's very photorealistic, and it's easier to see, I think, than it ever has been.
Right.
So I get asked it a lot. So I have a feeling it might happen. And nothing right now, but it just feels like the wave is pushing in that direction.
All right. So Claudio, to that end, in 1998, when you're writing in Paris, essentially you're creating this story arc, but the constant from 1998 until right now is the music, right? The music sort of is at the base of a lot of this stuff and a lot of what your career has become. However, in 2022, you're sitting on a tour bus and you're Zooming with us, and we're in completely different states. So obviously, and in many ways, the technology over that amount of time has changed vastly, which allows you to tell the story in many different ways. Which part of the technology advancements that we've had over the last 2 decades is most appealing for Coheed and Cambria? Which part of it is just kind of a distraction? Like, what have you guys really embraced? And you're like, oh my God, this is a really great way for us to tell the story in a way that we really want to.
I mean, I always want to see it kind of get played out in a live action, just in the simplest form, whether it be television or movie. But there's so many other things now we have VR, we have metaverses, we have all sorts of stuff. And I think there's a lot of source material for us to draw from, and again, like that was never really my approach. It was really just to make, comic books essentially, just to tell these stories different way, watch them get up off the record and come to life. And now it's like, yeah, sure, movies and television, but there's so many other places to stretch.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for me to wrap my head around all of them. But, you know, at this stage, I mean, I'd like to do everything. I mean, I think these characters are, I think the characters are really, you know, when I see our fans and I see them resonate with certain characters, that's so insane to me, you know, because I never anticipated that. I never anticipated anybody to see themselves connect with a character. That was just not on the top of my head. And like, when you see that fans have like a favorite, like you have Ambelina on their arm, or, you know, Willem Ryan, and, you know, it's just like, wow, you know, that's like me resonating with like Freddy Krueger or Darth Vader. You know, it's so cool.
No, absolutely.
I want to talk about the fandom for a second here, and I'm going to lead this part by saying that we got a tweet from a fellow musician, Claudio. It is a Peanut from 311, and he's listening right now. So he tweeted at us. So I wanted to give a shout out to Peanut, who's listening this morning. But you mentioned the fandom, and I'm going to give you an example. And this is a killing two birds with one stone, because I want to thank this listener. This morning I came in and there was a box sitting over here in the studio, and I'm like, well, what the hell's that? And I open it up, and first of all, it is a 4-pack of the Rush beer. All right, that was sent to me. All right, and it came with a letter. It says, Preston, a beer to share with a fellow Rush fan. These are not for export in the USA, so I coordinated a delivery from Henderson Brewing Company in Toronto to an associate's friend in Ontario. It was then driven from Ontario to Michigan to his mother's house.
Oh, my God.
A work associate drove from Michigan to Ohio. From Ohio, it was driven to Harrisburg, where I picked it up, and I drove it home to Langhorne, PA, and I now share a few with you. That is from Dean Gutierrez, an MMR listener. And so the reason I bring this up, A, I wanted to thank Dean. And second of all, in the world of progressive rock, there is a connection with the fans that I think is unique to itself. And because of conceptual works like you guys do, Claudio, there's further discussion about the music other than, I really like that song. Man, that rhythm's great. Or this guitar part's really awesome. You start talking about the subtext of the characters and the stories and all that stuff, and it just makes for a really special fan base. And I wanted to get, you know, your impressions on that.
Yes, we are so fortunate. I mean, our fan base is just amazing that they get into all of those sorts of things. Like last fall, we did a cruise that sold out, and everyone was super respectful. It was just, you know, it's more of a family. You know, we see the same faces a lot of the time. We've created relationships with our fans. You know, it's something that, again, like I just never thought I could only have dreamed of.
Right.
And it's like, it's like happening.
I wonder,
we're lucky in it.
I wonder, Claudio, how much of that connects to, and you come from a point of being shy. And, and I did stand-up comedy. I'm doing this now. But initially, I was kind of shy. And I think there's something, that draws a certain, you don't want to make blanket statements. It's for everybody, obviously, if you enjoy. But I think you're probably connecting in a way, because that's well known about you and your impetus for starting all this, that the people who don't feel that there's something quite for them, you're providing that. I mean, on a basic level, we can sense your joy over being able to do that. Would that be your greatest accomplishment, you believe, touching people who maybe up to now haven't found that thing that resonates for them?
I think so, absolutely. I mean, it's also like, it also provides something for me. Like, again, going and being shy, it's like, it's hard for me to walk into a room of people I don't know and be a personality. I tend to kind of cower off, and that's the whole idea of being, the Coheed line of one among the fence. I'm the one, at the dance, like, I'm the wallflower. It's just not for me to be a loud personality, and being on stage allows me to do that, and it allows me to be around people with like-minded thing. And sure, maybe it's something that I created that everyone's into, but it allows me to like kind of be open. It's a starting place for a conversation and friendship. So yeah, maybe that is I created friends.
You did. You clearly did.
If you're just tuning in, it's Claudio Sanchez, who's with Coheed and Cambria, and they're going to be in town in July. Tickets go on sale with the show at the Leah Corr Center tomorrow at 10 a.m. We played the song Shoulders as we were leading into the interview. You guys have a new song called The Liars Club. I saw the video, really cool animation. And like I said at the top, Claudio, not being aware of the full body of work of Coheed and Cambria, Liars Club seems like it has a different tone to it from the other songs that I've kind of skimmed through in your catalog. Dare I say, a little poppier. I mean, I'm trying to think of a better term, but what's the story behind the song and the sound of it all?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of this material was written pre-pandemic, through the pandemic, and I was just kind of open to all ideas. I figured, here's an opportunity for me to flex. Even Shoulders feels like a very new version. I mean, when that song was written, it was, primarily because, our A&R had threw this idea at me. I was up for the challenge. I created it. I put it aside. It wasn't going to happen. And then I brought it to my co-producer, Zach Cervini, and he was like, wow, this is a vibe that's not on the record. We should work with this. And that became a song. And kind of the same thing for Liars Club, although Liars Club, I think, was a little more immediate because I knew that was, I thought that was a theme that I really wanted to express on the record. Like, who doesn't want to, embrace the lie sometimes, when reality just isn't, the way you see it. Oh, yeah.
No. I was just wondering as you were talking and talking about that in Preston's question, and you mentioned Star Wars earlier. We have obviously know you're a fan. I think of George Lucas, who had the original vision, and perhaps tries to go in different ways. And he got eaten alive by his own fan base. Do you feel you get the latitude from your fan base to go out on these sort of creative ventures that might depart slightly from your sound?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, because it's not something that's foreign from what we've done. I mean, it's definitely we're definitely stretching with this new record more so than we have in the past. But we've also laid the groundwork in past records to do things like this. Okay. Like, if you guys fall into the discography at all, you find songs like Evagria or Number City. These are all songs that really kind of stretch outside of like what the comfort nucleus of what Coheed and Cambria does. So we're always kind of breaking out of that a bit. But we do it more so with this record. And I think it's really more appropriate because of the theme of the album, because the mind is opening up for this one character, and we're starting to realize that it experiences infinite. Like all infinite outcomes, this one character of Vaxis is consumed with, instead of seeing the world as we see it, he sees it as maybe the static of a television, because he can see every outcome at one moment.
Sounds like Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah.
Right. But almost so much more that he physically can't interact with any of them, if that makes any sense, into like a catatonic state, because it's so consuming, so overwhelming. And that's why I think, it made sense conceptually to really kind of step outside of the nucleus of what we do and kind of stretch. Like, you'll hear songs like Disappearing Act, which really kind of stretches the Window of the Waking Mind. There's all sorts of stuff on this record. I'm really, really proud of it. And Liars Club, I thought, was a really cool, statement to put out there, just to kind of get everyone's feet wet,
I love these concepts. It's really deep and heady stuff, but let's go back just a little bit. Did your old band break up because of an argument over gas money? Is that correct?
No, I don't know what. No, but where's that from? That's like a Quidditch question.
Wikipedia. It was on Wikipedia. Yeah. I'm like, wait a minute.
We're like, what? So we definitely almost broke up because of there were several moments, but to be completely honest, when Coheed first started back in 2002, the attention to the band was so intense. We would play shows and opening for bands, and we would play, and once we were done, the place would empty.
Oh.
It was severe. We had no idea that we had that impact. at that time. And so it really got to me as like the guy with the hair, the focus point. It like, I didn't realize like how much of a magnet I would become. And it kind of scared me. Like so much so that, you know, I broke down, and Gas Money wasn't never, you know, that might've been like, who the hell knows? I have no idea. But for real, like, my mentality was like disintegrating. Like,
wow.
And, you know, coming from like a person that, you know, again, like I am very much an introvert. It was really hard to be like, to have that so much attention when I grew up in my adolescence with none.
Huh.
So, you know, yeah.
Were you guys friends first or bandmates first, do you think?
Travis and I have been friends since we were 13. Like I met him through a mutual friend who wanted to start a band. So I guess we were bandmates before we even became friends, if that makes any sense. Before we even met, we were going to be in a band. But Travis is like Travis is my brother. I mean, we friggin' it's so wild how like insane and in sync we are, and how at one point we want to kiss each other, and at another point we want to just strangle each other. I mean, it's like, yeah. So we've been friends forever. Josh, I had known because our bands had played together. He was in a different band, and our scenes had crossed paths. And I remember this one story when Josh and I were like, we were drinking one time after a show. We were in different bands at the time, and we were on the side of a house, you know, urinating or whatever. And I said to him, and his band, to be honest, had been signed to Universal already. They were off and about to become something, but things had happened. And I had said to him, I said, you know, one day we're going to play in a band together. And he was like, yeah, right. Like, you know, because their career was starting, and here we are. So Josh, I guess we had been friends, you know, I guess in a band first. I'm not entirely sure how to answer that, but to be honest, like Josh, just to go off, you know, I play in a band with like some of the greatest musicians. I think they're in my opinion, I think they're very underrated. They don't really get like Josh. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever seen us play, but he's like one of the worst parts of my job is I don't really get to watch Josh play, because he's just such a animated, beautiful piece of art when he's behind the kit. And, you know, I just think he needs more recognition, as well as Travis. Just very interesting people. And Zach is actually the newest member of the band. I mean, well, when you say that, it's like 10 years, because our original bass player got arrested for robbing a Walgreens. I don't know if you guys know that.
Yeah. That's better than the Gas Money story.
We were aware.
No, but it's interesting how, you know, you evolve as a band, and how you have to like learn how to like be around each other in a whole bunch of different settings. You're talking about tour buses, you know, pre-show, on stage, post-show. And, you know, these are things that you just sort of have to like learn about each other. And, you know, like, you didn't make a vow to one another, you know, on an altar in front of a whole bunch of people, but like you want to make this work because it did work at a certain point. So, you know, the band today is different than the band 5 years ago, is different than the band 10 years ago. And do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I totally know what you mean, because it's nobody really understands like what it's like to be locked in a van, right? That's how we came up. It was, you know, 5 guys in a van, you know, well, initially, 5 guys, one, you know, and 4 members. But you start to see personalities and people, like, you become family, you know. It's like, you know, living with, you know, who you're blood born to be with. Now you're in a band doing that, you know, and the quarters are way smaller, you know. But, right? So it's like, you know, and you start to see these parts of people manifest, myself included, that it's like, wow, you know, you really, really get to know people in a way that you don't with others. And, you know, now we're lucky. This life has afforded us the opportunity for the luxuries of buses and, you know, hotel rooms and things like that. And, you know, 20 years into it, like, we all really have come to love what we do. Whereas, like, through that 20-year stretch, there may have been times where we really disliked it, you know, and not the artistic part, but just the living, you know. But for the most part, I mean, every day it feels like somebody talks about how excited and how grateful we are to be out here.
Wow, that's great. That's such great. It's an awesome place to be, man, and your fans are loving that you guys are having the success you are, and you're coming to town, and people have been stoked about the release of this album, so it's really cool. And judging by just glancing over our text messages, you got a bunch of new fans from sitting down and talking with us too, which is great.
Oh,
So,
sick.
I love it. So the Leah Core Center, July 27th, and tickets are available tomorrow at 10 a.m. Coheed and Cambria.com. The new album, Vaxis 2, A Window of the Waking Mind. Make sure you get that. We've been playing some songs from the album, and we're just excited. Thanks so much for coming on this morning, Claudio, and continued success to you and the band, brother.
Oh, thank you very much. And thank you for having me. This was awesome. I had a really good time.
Excellent.
Very cool.
Claudio Sanchez, guys, of Coheed and Cambria, and they're the real deal, man. Their body of work is dense. It is just, and by that I just don't mean by heavy in the music. There's a lot in the story.
Well, this is everything that, again, when we were getting concept albums, you were getting thematic albums and all that stuff, and you'd be in that world. This speaks to exactly that. So I'm going to start moving through the music because I really like what I've been hearing.
Yeah. Yep.
And I love the whole concept of this thing that is the band.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
And Press, I almost opened up a whole new door of conversation there, because when we was talking about being locked in a van with people, and I just kept thinking about the book that you turned me on to, Project
Hail Mary?
Hail Mary.
Oh, Hail Mary, yeah.
Where, they're in space, and they put these astronauts into suspended animation, and it's not because they don't want them to age. It's because if they had them in a spaceship for as long as they did, they would murder each other.
Yeah.
That's a legit thing. And so when you have these bands that are just on tour, and they're on tour for the rest of, this month and through March, and then all through the summer, like when you're locked in a room with people, just think about how much you guys want to kill me after 5 hours of being in the studio, and then times that by 1,000.
Throw you on a bus with us. All right. We love you, though, man.